Good afternoon. Thank you to everyone who is joining us today. I am Lane Convulcani. I am calling or online from the Miller Ward House in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Emory Alumni Association. Thanks again for joining. I just want to remind everyone that this is a live webinar recording that is being recorded throughout the duration. We'll send the recording to everyone who registered right after our presentation. If for any reason you have to step away from your computer, don't worry about it. We'll have the whole program sent to you so you can listen to it again or whenever you have time. I'm really excited to have our speaker today, B. Ray, who is a 97 college graduate from Emory. We're really excited to have her. She came to us by way of the Charleston chapter of Emory Alumni Association and is one of our favorite active alumna in that area, and excited to bring her to this global audience for everybody to hear her expertise. With that, I just want to say B has been a presenter for over 20 years speaking about entrepreneurship, leadership, and women in business. And she is speaking to a huge passion of mine, getting women networked in the right way so that they are focusing on their net worth. They're thinking about networking professionally and to advance their career and really make the most of their finances and their strengths. So I'm super excited that she's sharing her experience with us. She is the author of What Harvard Taught Me But My Kids Made Me Learn, which is coming later this year, and co-founder of the Millennial Women Network, where she empowers and mentors women in over 24 countries. She's also launched several high-tech and non-tech companies that she'll be able to share with us. And today she's going to talk to us a little bit about gender pay gap. How can we talk about it? How can we make ourselves better networkers and just more proactive in finances in our career and in our professional growth. So with that, I will turn it over to B. I do want to invite everyone to submit your questions throughout the presentation in the question box of GoToWebinar. If anything comes to mind, be sure to put it in there, and we're going to get to all the questions at the end. If for some reason we don't get to your question, I will send those out to B to see if she can answer them. So feel free to ask us any questions at all. And with that, I will turn it over to B. Thank you, B.
Thank you, Lane. I think I'm going to switch over to a screen and we'll get started. Hello, everybody. So what we're talking about today is net game to networking to net worth. And the reason we're talking about this is women tend to network fabulously for the bake sale or maybe even for a carpool. But when it comes to impacting our net worth, we're actually not so great about that. And so I threw in the net game because I was the captain of the Emory tennis team, and I thought it would be a great way to remember some tricks and tips if we can think about it from lessons that we have on the tennis court. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about me. These are actually my parents. This is the reason Emory University was the only school I applied to, is that they're huge Georgia Tech fans. So I like to tease, the only reason my name is B is because thankfully my parents realized that Yellow Jacket was inappropriate. But I did apply to Emory. It was a fabulous experience for me. And I had in mind so often of that time was still having a friend at Georgia Tech, because I just grew up in such a Georgia Tech household. So I'll tell you a little bit about a story. I did, as I said, play for the Emory tennis team every year. We did fabulously. Division III, often ranked 1, 2, or 3 in the nation. But for a Division I school, we would basically get slaughtered. And every year we played Georgia Tech. And one time I was probably 5th singles, 3rd double, so kind of way down the line. And we were playing against Georgia Tech, and we had lost straight down. We'd already lost the match 5-0, but you still try to play the next 4. And I was playing a doubles match, and we were down sort of 6-0, 3-0, really doing our best to stay on the court. And the ball came jammed right at me. I fell over, dusted myself off, and said, "Don't worry, it didn't hit me." And the woman pointed at me and said, I don't care if you're okay, but if it hits you, it's my point." And I didn't really know what to say to her at that point, but I simply looked right at her and I said, does this mean we're not going to be best friends? And that really shook her to her core. I bring you up that story partly to connect with Emory, partly to connect on the tennis court, but mostly to say that connecting with other people matters, making friends matters, and using it to your benefit matters. And so she wasn't particularly great at that moment. So as Lane mentioned, what we're talking about today is from net game to networking to net worth. And I have a few thoughts that I just in the promotion for this webinar, which by the way, I'm so excited to be a part of. It's great to be reconnected with Emory and to share some of these thoughts. I really look forward to your questions. But I'm going to go give a foreshadowing. What we are going to talk about today are the building and nurturing of networks, client conversions, and subtle sales. Additionally, as Lane mentioned, we're going to talk about the gender pay gap. And I have a few items to talk about, but one thing I will prepare you for is never do I spend any of my time thinking about those bad people who don't give us what we deserve, because there's no gain in that. But what we do have is the ability to assume that everybody is paid fairly, and what can we do to improve our stance so that we're not, as women, paid 66 cents on a dollar. And some of the things we're going to talk about are raising our hands, having 90 rather than having 90% of qualifications, rather than 110. We're going to share desires and opportunities. We're going to ask questions and be informed. I'll tell you more about that as we get closer. And when we talk about the net game, what we're talking about is choosing the right partner. That consistency pays. We're going to stay in the lines. We're going to follow through, and we're going to bend your knees. So I'm thinking you've seen some of this, as that was in the advertisement for the webinar, and you're here. Let's go ahead and get right to it. But before we do, let me tell you a little bit about why perhaps I might be qualified to share with you. And indeed, I was in the graduating class of Emory College in 1990. I mentioned I was part of the tennis team. Later, I had the privilege of attending Harvard Business School, and it is about that experience that I'm writing my book. As we mentioned, is called What Harvard Taught Me But My Kids Made Me Learn. The genesis of that is really that business is done with people, so people skills matter. And it turns out that the best way I found to develop people skills was to raise some children in my own home. And so a lot of what we'll talk about in the next 45 minutes or so are those lessons from being a family person, raising children, to parlaying that into the business world. I have mentored hundreds of companies, some through a nonprofit that I ran, some as individuals, and I currently mentor across 24 different countries through the Millennial Women Network. So everything that we talk about today is not just from my personal experience, it's from surveys, questions, experiences of all of these other people, and I'm hoping I'm doing the best I can to bring those lessons from several hundred others right here to you so you can grab what makes sense for you. But sometimes what's most important about what qualifies us to share is actually not our successes and accomplishments, it's our failure. And I've got a long list of those. One of the things that's funny, as Lane mentioned, I've been a speaker for over 25 years. And when I started speaking, it was often on the issues of software licensing. And I was often on a panel with the same group. One was an expert witness in the law, it had to do with software licensing, and one was an attorney. And then myself, I was working in that business. And we used to laugh at the introduction because one gentleman would say, I have 25 years serving in courts and being an expert witness on software licensing. And I would always think, well, I have 25 years breathing, in and out, in and out. But it did put me into a position to learn a great deal, and it put me in a position to have plenty of failures. And we can share from our failures so that maybe these are mistakes someone else can avoid. But when we talk about net worth, due to a crumbled marriage, I actually had the accomplishment of having $700,000 of personal debt while I was the sole provider for 3 children. So I have learned a great deal about the need of crawling out of that problem and was able to do so largely by networking and leveraging not only education and experience, but personal relationships. So let's dive right in. Building networks. When we talk about building networks, one of the greatest platforms is LinkedIn. Most of you are probably already on LinkedIn, and I don't want this entire webinar to be about a LinkedIn how-to. Nevertheless, there are certain aspects of LinkedIn that I want to go ahead and take a few minutes to share. And one is, of course, be on it if you're not already there. What's so powerful about LinkedIn is not the individual direct connections, but it's the second degree connections. It's the connections where you have the ability to see, I want to go get a job at Coca-Cola. Who do I know that knows someone there? Who can I tap into? So it's very important that you go ahead and get yourself at least 500 connections of people who know you, respect you, love you, can speak to your expertise. I don't think it's that important to go get tons of references or recommendations. Some people are happy to do that, and it's probably not a bad idea, but it is very important that you have the ability to leverage the actual network. And LinkedIn does an incredible job of of doing the work for you, so that if you get a transfer, maybe your spouse is moving to St. Louis and you need to know, well, who do I know that knows people in St. Louis? If you've done a good job connecting with people who know you, respect you, maybe they're people you went to Emory with, maybe they're people you went to graduate school with, maybe they're people you went to high school with, they're at some of your jobs. Make sure that those are relationships you can tap, not because of the individual you're connecting with, but because of who they can help you when and if you need that. I'm also a fan, if you are in a certain industry or you know that you will be seeking a job pivot, that you go ahead and convert some second degree connections to first degree connections. And that is not too difficult to do if you just run a search on, maybe it's a job title. You want to be an event planner. All you have to do is run a search on a location, a job title, and degree of connections. My suggestion would be first and second. And what you are likely to find is the individuals you want to meet, i.e. your second degree connections, you already share not one connection, but 2, 3, 4, or 5. And it's very simple to find the one connection you have to the people you want and just say, hey, Sue, I see that you know Amanda. Would you mind introducing? I'm trying to learn more about this line of work. And again, as long as you have that foundation, LinkedIn can start doing that work for you. I personally am a fan of, every time you do gain a new connection, trying to jump on the phone and just say, hey, we connected. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. What was the reason you wanted to connect, and how can we help each other? So pay attention first to maintaining a good base, and then second, especially in a time of pivot, either a geographic pivot or a company pivot, you want to go work for a certain organization, or a industry pivot, go ahead and search out people who are in those locations or in those companies or in those positions, and you will be surprised at the power that LinkedIn has to help you do that. When we're talking about building networks, one of the things I do want to talk about is that client conversions. And so what I mean by this is to be deliberate with your networks, whether it's spending time with people. One of the things that always impresses me is individuals who want to be in touch with me and they just don't let years go by. They know that our business or our business network is connected enough that they simply check base. And so there's a number of philosophies here, whether you have 200 main connections or sort of 12 of the really important people that you let speak into your life. Maybe you have both. I am a fan of tracking that. If you've got 12 people that you look to as accountability partners, or you look to as you're mentoring them or they're mentoring you, I say put them on a schedule and make sure that you let every single month, you schedule at least a month, a 1 hour phone call, and you're touching base. What can I do for you? Have I told you about this challenge? Maybe you can help me in this area. And being very deliberate about, I call it client conversions, because in the end, when we're talking about our net worth and building our business, everyone becomes a client. But what I'm actually talking about is just really being deliberate about the way you manage the people in your network and the way you're growing that. And so we need to track the numbers. For me, I spend a lot of time with publishers, authors, speakers as I'm building my speaking career. And I have a few hundred people that are in that core network. And I don't need to talk to them even every month, but I certainly don't like 6 or 12 months to go by without making some connection. And I want to make sure I'm growing those numbers. So it's really important to think through, in order to be successful in my business, I need to have X number of contacts. For me, that may be a few hundred. For you, that may be 1,000. I'm not sure your business. But what I do think is smart is to figure out, well, where am I today? Where can I be in 3 years? And then just to set yourself some goals, and that can be tracked through a CRM system, or you can actually just track it on LinkedIn, where if you set yourself a monthly goal that you're going to increase by a certain percentage, could be 10%, you will eventually gain the contacts that you need in building your network. Remember, what we're trying to do is go from sort of willy-nilly being connected to people, which is helpful usually to the other person and not necessarily deliberately, intentionally helping myself, to using your network to benefit you. And what I mean by a staged approach is, for me, I have 30 people that send me speaking engagements. So they do great keynotes all around the country, and they know that I've done great keynotes, and they trust what I deliver. They trust that I'll be engaging enough, and they will refer me to a keynote where they've already done. I have found that the sweet spot is 30. I get way above that, I'm not really in touch with those people. I get too far below that, there's not enough business coming my way. So when I say a staged approach, I didn't just meet these women and all of a sudden we had this tight network. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to learn that they were speaking to the types of groups that I was speaking to. I wanted them to trust me and hear me speak. And then I wanted to have a conversation about what would it look like for me to be a direct partner with you. And I encourage you to do the same thing, that if you have a core network upon which you're going to leverage your business, how are you going to get from the beginning to the end stage? Usually, if the core network is only about 30, the beginning stage might be 100, 150 until you whittle down who are the best 30 for you. And you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have a staged approach as to figuring out how those individuals who are getting into the core aspects of building your network. So this is my precious new granddaughter. I gained her when I got married in March, and so I probably use any excuse I can to show her off. But again, I mentioned that my people skills I learned by being a parent. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about is, with a 3-year-old, many of you have gone through parenting and have remember what it was like to have a 3-year-old. They call it the terrible twos, moving on to terrible threes. But I've found that when I have her for 6 or 8 hours, we can have not one cross word. The trick, however, is that every time she asks me for something, hey, can we jump on the trampoline? Can we walk the dogs? Can you give me a piggyback ride? Every single time I do a little tit for tat, which is okay, but count to 5. Okay, but tell me your ABCs. Okay, but hop on one foot. Whatever it is, there is this understanding that we are a team and you get to ask me for something and I get to ask you for something. And I use that as an example because I learned through this experience that that's a great way to leverage networks where I might be meeting someone new through my son's basketball game, but learning what he or she does for a living, learning about how we might be able to help each other, learning about what his or her goals are, and then me being clear on mine allows me to say, oh, I would love to introduce you to this friend who is also in the business of financial services or wherever you could be helped. Would you mind helping me? I've been trying to get in front of that audience. And so when I'm thinking about subtly selling myself, I have this vision of me being with my grandchild and remembering that it's not all take. And I don't want for me to ever be the one who's always taking, but a little bit of back and forth actually builds a strong network and gives people a reason to connect. And my experiences is people love that. So we're always building. The riches are in the niches. It's very hard for people to help you grow your business if they don't understand what it is you're looking for. And the most common mistake that people make is they try to be all things to all people. So maybe you're an accountant, or maybe you're a lawyer, or maybe you're a consultant. And if you're networking with people and you are a generalist because you can do all sorts of accounting or you can manage a diverse practice, that will actually backfire because then someone in your network doesn't know how to refer you. So the riches in the niches is a reminder that if you can be introduced as the person who does corporate law for startup companies, you're going to get so many more introductions that will grow into trademarks or intellectual property or some other kind of business. But the introduction is more likely when you can hone in your brand, when you can hone in what you're doing. Same, I have a friend who's an accountant and he's excellent at valuing startup companies. He's going to help you understand the value of your company in the event you're going to make an exit, you're going to sell or merge. Now, of course, he does all sorts of other accounting, but when he helps people to talk about him when he's not in the room by having one brand, one niche, then he's more likely to get those introductions. He's more likely to leverage. And what's actually the second part about that is always be clear when you're asking. Say, I would love, whenever you're speaking to someone and you want to help me out, I would love to be introduced to. So in his case, he might say, I'd love to be introduced to companies between 10 and $30 million who think that they will be exiting in the next 3 years. That's really specific. So now all of a sudden, making an introduction to Mike becomes more possible, easier. And then he's already helped you know what his specialty is. He is a CPA who helps define the value of your company. For me, I particularly like to speak to women's business groups, any conference. If I'm, have I, tomorrow I'll be speaking to a national credit bureau. So that's very different. Other times I speak to sports teams. But if I were to tell you I can speak to anyone, anywhere, there's no way you would ever make an introduction for me. So I share that with you so that we can remember to define or package or brand ourselves in a way that allows other people to help us build our network and, more importantly, leverage the network that we already have as a way of growing our business. So I do want to pause to tell you something I think is really funny. Is I gave a talk to a group of students one time at a university not far from Charleston, and I mentioned the riches are in the niches. And funny, that was the most common comment that I got back. The professor had asked people to submit comments to me, and oh, that was really helpful, and thank you for that, and it's hard to do, and so on and so forth. But what I laughed about was one individual in the class said his favorite comments was that the riches are in the ditches. And boy, did that make me laugh. First of all, of course, he had totally misheard me. Second of all, I would never say something like that, just the word of referring to any other person as being in a ditch. But what I loved about it was the message, even though the words were wrong, the message he was getting was something I was talking about, and it was all about relationships. What this person heard throughout my talk was no matter who you're talking to, you never know who they are, and you never know how you can help each other, and you never know when you might want to call on that person. So making sure that we treat everyone with respect and dignity and kindness is always a good investment. Now, I know you know that, but I thought sharing that sort of funny story would help keep that in mind. And what he heard when I said riches in the niches was he heard the words riches in the ditches, and what he meant, or what his mind translated for himself, was even people who might not look like they're at the top of their game or the top of their career or filled with accolades might be able to open doors. And of course, I absolutely believe in that. When we talk about branding, I've already actually mentioned a lot of that, but it basically that your brand matters. I don't love this next point, and I don't want to be discouraging to anyone, but I'll go ahead and share with you that what I have found in my years is that women really do only get one brand. Somehow, men can be a golfer, a leading banker, and a dad, but women really get seen as the person who's in charge of the school PTO, or the executive at the major corporation, or the neighborhood mom, something like that. And I share that with you so that you can just be mindful of who do you want to be? Who do you want to show up as wherever you go? And sometimes that means keeping those work clothes on, even though you're going to a school event, if you need to show up as the banker or you need to show up as the lawyer. It's, um, I found it more helpful to know this about our society than to try to fight against it. So let's go on. Right now, we as women are often being paid in the 60, 70 cent range to the dollar. And as I started to mention early on, one of my greatest pet peeves is when a female speaker will speak to an audience of 100 or so women, and it's all about the bad men or why we're not getting paid more and the reason women need to get paid more. Well, I'm not a fan of ever speaking in that way, because what we want is to empower ourselves. And so, again, to use the parenting lesson, I have two boys, and whenever they fuss at each other, they're usually both wrong. But if Robert and William are fussing, if I'm talking to Robert, I will only talk about what Robert did wrong. It's none of my business. It's none of his business to talk about what his brother did wrong, because Robert is the only one who can change Robert. And I feel the exact same way about us as women, is we have the ability to assume, just assume, that everybody is paid fairly, whether that's true or not. What we can do when we assume that is say, what can I do to ensure that I'm getting paid more fairly or as fairly as possible? And the first thing is that one of the statistics we understand is that if there's a new project available, if there's a job available, it tends to be the case that if women are that women will only apply if they are 110% qualified for that next raise, that next position, that next job. They look at all the qualifications and education experience, um, types of projects they've managed in the past. And if they've met and exceeded every single goal, more often than not, that's when women will finally say, hey, consider me. However, men will apply when they only have about 85 to 90% of those qualifications. And what I'm suggesting is let's go do the same thing. You can always get rejected, but go out there, give yourself a chance to be considered for more projects, more raises, more next positions. The second is simply raise your hand. Women tend to, not across the board, but across the world, we tend to wait till someone taps us on the shoulder. We think that we are going to be seen and recognized. We forget to do our victory laps. Go ahead, raise your hand. Go ahead, let it be known when you've had a great victory. Go ahead and take that lap. Sometimes that means visiting corporate headquarters. Sometimes that means making sure that you're the person on the team that's making the presentation. Sometimes that, if you're an individual, that might mean sharing it through social media, sharing it with your closest friends, sharing your great news in an email newsletter. But it's okay to, not in an obnoxious way, not in a consistent way, but go ahead and raise your hand for your victories. Raise your hand for opportunities. Don't be shy. It's a noisy world out there. And as much as we don't need to just contribute to empty, noisy words, we need to be a part of it. So indeed, raise your hand. That's the second thing that we can do to mitigate the gender pay gap. Now, obviously, I care a great deal about networking. And one of the things that Lane mentioned is I'm a co-founder of a group called the Millennial Women Network. It's really just a free online system where we share some information, and there are women connected through the social media and through some of the webinars in over 24 countries. But the reason I mention that is because so often men share just with buddies in their neighborhood over a barbecue, playing basketball. Hey, I'm thinking of leaving my job. I'm thinking of becoming a partner in a new law firm. I'm thinking of starting a new business. I'd like to go work at a different corporation that's in town. I'm thinking of a move to another town. But women don't often share our desires. We're afraid it might look like we failed if it doesn't happen the next time we touch base with this friend or colleague or associate. And what I'd like to see you do is share your vision of where you'd like to go. Start. What will happen is the universe will start to put people in your place. When you start claiming the vision you have for yourself, where you're going to work, the level of the position you're going to be at, friends and colleagues will introduce you to other people who have been able to reach that position. You'll be able to learn how they got there. You'll be able to minimize the time it takes you to get there. You'll start to understand some of the hurdles, some of the opportunities. So go ahead and share where you want to go, share opportunities with others, and definitely just sharing desires and being informed. So what I mean by that is be in the driver's seat. I've been in a position to hear repeatedly about companies in particular who mergers, leverage buyouts, sales. And what's surprising to me is how many women in particular are frustrated that when they helped their company with a major sale or a major merger, their male counterparts got paid a greater percentage than they did. Well, under peeling that onion back a little bit farther, what we found out too often was their male counterparts negotiated up front. If this merger goes through and I help with it, I want X percentage. Will my bonus be X, Y, or Z if I achieve a certain success? And the main reason they were able to do that is because they had a friend or a colleague or an associate who had at some point actually given them the details about their own situation. This is my salary, this are my stock options, this is when my stock options vested, these are how I converted my stock options, this is what I negotiated for my bonus. And if you're flying blind, it's really hard to know how to negotiate. But if you build a tight network of close friends where you can discuss these kinds of details, you will be in the driver's seat. You will be able to think through, wait a minute, I should have asked for that. So I promised you at the beginning that the best thing that I can offer you are my failures. So I'll go ahead and share one of them. I was actually the CEO of a Silicon Valley company. It was about a $5 million company. I was 27 years old. I hadn't been in the position for very long, but it was, I'd kind of helped them transition. I got them to where they wanted to go. And then I was leaving and going to go get a master's and go to the Harvard Business School. And my stock options, I was actually giving my stock up at that time. And so I received literally about a $4,000 check that I got paid out what the company said the stock was worth. And as a fool, I said, thank you very much. This was, in my mind at the time, stock wasn't something I looked at as a way of building net worth, which of course it's one of the best ways of building your net worth. And I literally just got dumb lucky. The head of sales and marketing left within about 4 or 5 months of when I left, and she had been there longer. She was 20 years older than I was, and much more sophisticated and much better networked in the values of companies, the value of our company, the value of her stock. And I don't know exactly her transaction, but what I do know is they could not pay her a certain stock price unless they paid me the exact same stock price, because such a short period of time had gone by. And out of the blue, I received an $80,000 check. So that means I was drastically off in the value of the company. And the real reason is I had never talked to one other soul about it. I didn't take it to a friend. I didn't take it to a lawyer. I didn't take it to anyone. I just said, thank you. So, of course, I'm embarrassed to tell you that story, but I hope that in doing so, there's somehow a blessing for you. And you can remember to fight what our gender's more natural tendency might be, which is to keep quiet, to keep private, to keep to ourselves and take ourselves out of the driver's seat when we could be learning and we could be being better prepared for negotiations. So, something we didn't talk too much about at the beginning, but I do love to share is efficiency, especially for women, where we tend to put ourselves down and feel so many demands. It's never enough at home. It's never enough at work. So I thought I would share with you my two favorite work hacks. Work hack number one is timed email. I wake up every morning and at 8 a.m., roughly 15 to 20 people are getting an email. And what that does for me is it allows me to think about my day, plan for my day, make me feel as though I'm working from roughly 8 to 9:30 or 10 when I'm actually just giving myself a breather, a chance to think about the day, think about my priorities, read carefully the emails that are coming to me. The thing I like to do least is to wake up in the morning with a long list of to-dos, and having timed email where I've thought about the emails the night before or in the middle of the night or maybe even on a weekend, times when I do not want to be emailing others because then they'll email me. And I don't want to be getting too many emails on weekends or late at night. So I might go ahead and give myself a get ahead and address a question or reach out through email, but timing it to go out at 8 a.m. is my favorite trick. There are plenty of systems that do this. I use something called Right Inbox, RIGHT Inbox, but there are many of them, and I don't have one I necessarily recommend. I just strongly recommend timed emails. The second reason for timing your emails is very few people need to hear from you within a few minutes. Um, but yet, if some email comes in, you might want to address it right away. It's already on your mind. You might as well go ahead and answer that question. But if you reply 5 minutes later, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get a second email and a second question or a follow up or a qualification. Whereas I have found it's always better that even if you address it right away, time it for an hour, time it for 4 hours, because then you can't get back into the back and forth with that client or that colleague or that employee. You can respectfully be answering their question, and yet you don't have to get locked into that back and forth. What you can do is go to the next colleague, the next associate, the next employee. So my favorite is work hack number one is your timed email. The third reason for that is like in a sales outreach, when you're building a network, I might email and say, hey, it was so great to meet with you. I would love to catch a cup of coffee one day. Now I'm going to send that at 8 o'clock in the morning, but while I'm already thinking of that person, I'm going to go ahead and send the second follow-up email that's going to happen in 4 days or so when I haven't gotten a response back from the reach out email. I'll say, reaching out again, thought I'd give you some background on my work or some background on what I want to talk to you about. Of course, it would already be in your draft box to go out in 5 or 6 days. So if they do email you back, you can always delete it. But while you've got their LinkedIn profile open or your CRM open, go ahead and time the first email and go ahead and time the second email. And you'll be surprised at how much efficiency you find in doing that. So my second work hack email is a calendar system. Again, there are many, many, many of these systems. I use Calendly. It's one that can accept payment. You can have temporary calendar events like I'm going to be in New York, set up a cup of coffee, or just regular events that you would offer throughout the year. But what I have found is people love to be in control. They are happier when they feel they can jump on your calendar. And so I put this right in every signature. And it really helps if you have a long list of clients and they are frustrated that you're not getting back to them quick enough or you're not setting up time for them. Well, as soon as you transfer that power from I will set up an appointment for you or I will reach out to you to, hey, my calendar is open. It's available to you anytime. Go ahead and jump on a call. You'll be amazed at how much happier your clients are because they're not feeling like they can't get a hold of you. They have now been given control. And of course, it keeps you from all of those treacherous, is Tuesday okay? Is Monday okay? Emails that are such time sinks. So those are my two favorite efficiency hacks. Now I'm going to run through some of the net game thoughts where when we are building our net worth, there's a couple strategies, and if you think about them on the tennis court, that might help. And really choosing the right partner. So unfortunately, I have had a failed marriage. We went through a terrible physical health time and ran up hundreds of thousands of dollars of bills. And so I have not done this aspect very well. And in other areas, I've had really good partners, life partners, business partners, but it is very important to choose the right partner, build your strategy together, then know your position and know who's taking what turn. What I've seen with a lot of super successful couples is one person might need more support today, and maybe today lasts a month or a year or a season, and the other partner gets more support, more decision making about jobs or transfers, etc. So you're taking turns, but choosing the right partner is a really critical aspect to building your own net worth. Another tennis analogy is staying in the lines. So when we're talking about actually investing, it's certainly recommended that you only invest in businesses you can understand. I've met too many people who come across the next great thing. And some people have made money on things like artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency. However, I have found that those individuals who understand that breaking technology do much better at uh, watching those stocks. So if you are investing in direct stocks, invest only in businesses you actually understand. Know your investment goals, and that will help you to know your personal tolerance for risk. And know what's your investment priority. I now have my first child who's in college, and so making sure that I can pay that bill, which actually happened to be today, that's a joy, and that's a priority for me. Is investing, my what are your investment priorities? That will help you to know when to buy, when to sell, etc. And really importantly is when you're staying in your own lane or your own lines, um, what is your time worth to you? I have watched so many people waste time figuring out about the value of someone else's stock when they could just be growing their own personal business. So, something to keep in mind. Follow through. As you're building your network for net worth, it's really important to recognize that follow through, by the way, which is the most important lesson in tennis. You can get your racket back, you can get your feet in place, you can even hit the ball. But if you do not follow through, the ball will never go over the net. And follow through in life is so unusual today. We live in these very busy, busy times where it's more common for someone to say something like, sure, let's talk next week, or I'd love to get together, but they never do. Or they say, oh, I didn't realize you were in a business that's similar to mine. We could help each other. It is so rare, it's so common for people to say things like that, and so rare for people to follow through, that you will be a shining, shining star if you simply reach out with an email, if you simply provide some background information, if you set up a time to get together for a cup of coffee. It will blow you away. So follow through as you're building your network is so important. And lastly, I put in this aspect just for me because bending your knees is certainly a critical aspect of playing tennis. I was very blessed to be taught at age 14 how to play tennis. The gentleman who taught me was 87 years old, so he wasn't great at bending his knees. But boy, he had me walking around in squats if he ever caught me in what he calls Pinocchio knees. Um, and for me, building and a great net worth and net life has come through my faith. And so I thought that was a kind of funny image and an analogy that might be of value to you. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up and get to some of the questions. Before I went, I wanted to go back to what I was talking about regarding people skills, the book I have been working on, and the ability to tie business experience with business teaching and parenting. And I wanted to mention to you that if you did a quick Google search for TEDx talk, my name, you would be able to find this talk, and I would really appreciate it if you would have a listen. I would always love to hear your feedback on that in particular. So thank you for letting me be a part of talking about net game to networking and net worth. And if we want, we can switch over to questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Bea. Go ahead and include your questions in the chat box for GoToWebinar. We've already got a couple that have rolled in, but go ahead and continue to submit those as we are asking questions. Our first question is one of our listeners would love suggestions about building financial wealth while paying off student loans.
What a great question. Building financial wealth while paying off student loans is, to me, you're always thinking about making sure there is something that's growing. So giving yourself the benefit of the doubt. Some people are running towards paying every last amount into the student loan without making a separate investment. I am a fan of giving yourself a break, like don't take all of your money and put it into stock, but take a portion so you can watch something grow, even if you could pay off your student loan faster. I find that the excitement of that compounding growth will help you to stay encouraged to pay off that student loan debt. I know it's hard, but every time you can think through saving money, however small it is, putting that straight into some kind of investment and then giving yourself, a pat on the back when you do that. The second thing that has been really helpful to me, and this is a Dave Ramsey trick, was super surprising, is if you have debt in 4 different things, you probably have 4 different interest rates. You may have a credit card debt of 18%, or you may have a student loan of 5%. And he says something that's so fascinating, which is pay off the smallest loan first, even if it is the least amount, the least percentage. And the reason is he understands the emotional benefit of creating wealth, the energy, the positive energy you get when you are owing money to only 3 people, not 4 people. And so that was counterintuitive to me. But if you're talking about managing any kind of debt, student loan debt included, one piece of advice that I have seen work and works for me is get yourself to a position where you owe money to fewer people, and it won't zap your energy in the same way. It will just be a great way to whittle one source of debt down, or two, whatever you have.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Sure.
We have another question that's come in. Someone who feels behind in investing for their future and retirement, rather than just saving or not spending money. This person would like to know how savvy people increase their wealth in general.
So the best way is to find something you fully own. So, of course, corporations and a steady job is absolutely worth something. And working for a large corporation, and maybe they're contributing to a 401k. But if there's a business that you can own and you can control, even if it's a side business, that is a great way to build your own net worth. If you are going to start a business or buy into a business or buy into a franchise, I think it's really important to understand your exit strategy. So, for example, if it's a franchise that you just want to live off of in your retirement, where you may have invested some time and energy to get the franchise up and running, but you're going to hold on to it. You're going to use the money from that business as you retire. That's a very different strategy than I'm going to buy a business, I'm going to build it up, and I'm going to sell it in 10 years. Everything you do in that business is a decision point based on I want to keep this versus I want to sell it. From simple things like your taxes. So often people try to give themselves a tax break by showing lower income on a business that they own, because that trip that they took to Disney World, they also stopped by and saw a client, so it was a write-off or something like that. Now, what they're actually doing when they go to sell their business is they're eroding their opportunity to sell that business for its true value, because they've minimized their sales and profitability over the years. And so I'm a big fan of knowing your exit before you get started when you're investing in something, which I think is the best way to grow your net worth.
Great. That's a great question. This one is related, but it deals with how to build net worth on a fixed disability income.
Yeah, that's also a challenge. The best way, of course, is finding ways to save, finding ways to enjoy and leverage. So I don't know if we have a ton of time to go over this with you now, but two of my favorite things is I'm a house swap addict. So I haven't paid for a vacation spot in decades. And I've taken all three of my children to Austria, Australia, New York, Chicago, skiing 6 times. And what we've done on virtually every single time is gone to a home exchange network and swapped out. So that's a whole nother talk in and of itself, and how fun that can be, and how uh, my one bad experience and my many great experiences. But the point I'm trying to share is that the sharing economy is sometimes doesn't mean always cutting back. Is that things like a house swap or bartering are great ways to decrease the bleed of spending so much money without cutting back on enjoying life and to its fullest.
That's great. That sounds like an upcoming webinar plug.
Maybe.
That could be a good one. Thank you so much, Bee. We've got a couple of people who are just interested in following up with you. If it's okay for us to share your email, we'd love to send them your way for some extra help and guidance.
That would be great. I would look forward to that.
Great. Thank you for everyone who joined us, and look out for the recording in the next 24 hours. You can listen to it again, share it with some friends, and I'll also include in our follow-up email ways to get involved with Emory Alumni Association. This is a really exciting time to be a part of Emory. We have deployed people all over the country who live in cities to engage our Emory communities more thoughtfully. We want to know what Emory alumni want to talk about, what they want to learn about, what they want to connect with each other. So please feel free to share with me any ideas and topics you'd like to have on an upcoming webinar, as well as any upcoming alumni learning programs, and we will bring this to you. Thank you so much, Bea, for being a presenter. You had a lot to share, and I think we've gotten a lot out of your experience and ways of growing our own worth. Thank you very much
Wonderful.
for everybody for joining, and please stay in touch and let us know if there's anything that we can bring to you in the near future. And have a great rest of the week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.